a new avenue. Anyway, this one is called A French New Year Resolution by John Ebrington, which is me, of course, my code name, my nom de plume. There we are. So here we go. We avoid thinking about it, but we all have to face up to dying one day. She glanced at the mirror and sighed. Normally she felt young or middle-aged until she remembered what she looked like in the mirror. However, today she felt just as she looked, elderly. She was not going to let her get it down, just get on with life and make the best of the time she had left. She wrapped her scarf round her neck. It was going to be cold in the cemetery. Once she left the warmth of her son's new car, she quickly ran a comb through her hair. The doorbell sounded. No, it wasn't Jean-Marc's aggressive double ring, but a brief, timid ping. It was her grandson Pierre, with his big feet and hands and ears that stuck out. Although he seemed so shy and clumsy, you wouldn't know it looking at him. But Pierre was a rising star in a local rugby team. "Where's your father?" she asked. Pierre blinked and looked away and mumbled something about his papa having to work. She was immediately suspicious. The dear boy's hiding something, she thought, but it's no good getting cross with him. No doubt he's only following his mother's orders. Jean-Marc and daughter-in-law Suzanne were always trying to hide the truth from her when things went wrong. Sadly, their efforts, she thought, were usually turned out to be no more than a rather stupid waste of time. On closing the front gate, she looked back fondly at her house, with its white walls sparkling in the French January sun. Jean-Marc and Pierre had spent a lot of time repainting the outside, and they had done such a good job. She'd been born under that roof of red Roman tiles and lived in the same house since getting married, and now her big grandson Pierre was taking her to lay flowers on her husband's grave. It had been hard to carry on alone after his death, to sell their little shop, which wasn't a real success, and to look after the 3 small children. He was only 46 when he collapsed and died in the street from a massive heart attack. Young Pierre looked in the mirror as they moved off. "Are you looking forward to going to university after your gap year?" she asked. Momentarily, Pierre appeared disturbed by the question. Pierre had surprised the whole family by getting excellent grades in his exams last summer, entitling him to go to the University of Toulouse to study computer sciences. But now he told her he was not so sure. He said he might change his mind and continue his little local gap year job as a shop assistant. She raised her eyebrows, surprised by the sudden change of heart. Not only was a university degree going to be really useful for his future employment prospects, but the university at Toulouse was also going to provide him with excellent opportunities for developing his rugby. She looked at him intently and asked, "Why? Pourquoi? Why have you changed your mind?" There was a pause. Then he unconvincingly said he felt the family could not afford the financial expense of him going. The car fell silent while she reflected on what was happening in her family. As they gathered speed, she realised that it was now at least 2 weeks since she'd last seen her son, Jean-Marc. He wasn't at the New Year's festivities because of his work. He had also missed Christmas Day. The Christmas Day meal she had lovingly prepared for all the family, with pot roasted pheasants exactly the way her grandmother had shown her. Suzanne had said that Jean-Marc had been ordered to be on police duty at the gendarmerie on Christmas Day. I don't remember him having to do that before, she had said. In the big mirror above the fireplace, she'd seen Suzanne give Pierre a quick, secret glance, and had suddenly felt that she had not heard the truth. They just got onto the motorway when she leant forward. "Pierre, mon petit, we must return home. I've forgotten the vegetables." She had been upset that her policeman's son had failed to turn up. Distracted, she'd forgotten the box of produce from her vegetable plot. Trimmed and cleaned and left ready for the family. Pierre told her not to worry, stating he would collect them when he brought her home. He smiled, pointing out that they'd forgotten the main thing, the flowers for Grandpa's grave. She quietly looked at him. He started to become such a fine young man, not a bit like his father, who at times had been so difficult, always grumbling when things went wrong. Between the flats she saw the tall, dark spires of the cypress trees in the cemetery. The wind felt cold on getting out of the car. Pierre took one of the plastic mineral bottles by the water tap, filled it, and followed her to the grave. She removed the dead flowers from their last visit. This was the family vault that she had managed to pay for despite everything when she became a widow. The polished slabs shone in the sunlight. This was where she too would in due course be buried, when she would rejoin her husband. He was so handsome when they married. Pierre had some of his features and a similar temperament, even talking like him at times. She quietly looked at Pierre and smiled. Pierre then took her arm as they walked back to the car in silence. Suzanne opened the door to them, looking fresh and well-groomed, and kissed them both on both cheeks. There was the delicate smell from the kitchen of roasting lamb and garlic. She sometimes had arguments with Suzanne, but then there was no doubt that her son had picked a really good cook. Suzanne took her coat and invited her to sit down as the food was ready. She asked Suzanne, where was Jean-Marc? Why hadn't he collected her? Suzanne had told her to go through the dining room where he was there waiting. On going in, she observed him sitting in the dark corner near the glazed door to the balcony. With the bright sunlight on the net curtains, she could hardly see at first. Then, as she began to be able to see him properly, she realised that he was ill. He looked ashen grey and was silent. She turned and asked Suzanne, what has happened to him? Suzanne suddenly lost her stiff reserve and burst into tears, and explained that Jean-Marc had only 3 days before Christmas experienced a very serious heart attack. They only just managed to get him to hospital in time. The doctors said that he won't be able to work or drive a car again. She said nothing as Suzanne spoke, but cried quietly. Jean-Marc was like his father, but this time they'd managed to save him. She knew they had been keeping something from her over Christmas. She asked, why hadn't they informed her of Jean-Marc's illness? After all, she was his mother. Suzanne's voice quivered while she said that they felt unable to tell her until things looked a bit more promising. But look, they had let him out of hospital early so she could see his mother today. The following day, She had a determined look on her face, walking around the local town, clutching her handbag tightly. It was market day, but she had more important things to do than shopping or chatting with acquaintances. She'd spent half the night searching for things around her house. Despite feeling tired, she was a woman on a mission. First, she went to the jeweller's, where she sold an old gold watch and all her jewellery. No point keeping these heirlooms anymore. The shopkeeper, who knew her, gave her a fair price for them. She felt he couldn't exactly cheat an 82-year-old lady who had still had all her faculties. Just think of the bad publicity that had he done so. She graciously thanked the shopkeeper and hurried to deposit the money he gave her. Next, she went to see the notaire. Notaire is a French solicitor. They exchanged pleasantries, and as she sat down in front of the lawyer's big desk, he wished her a happy new year and asked about the family. She quickly explained how Jean-Marc had experienced a heart attack, leaving him almost bedbound, the notaire murmured sympathetically. He took off his glasses and leant back whilst he listened. She told him she had reached a decision over her property. The lawyer looked interested as she described what she had inherited from her parents, her house, the barns, the fields that the neighbours had rented for years. She explained how Jean-Marc and Pierre had been very good to her by spending a lot of time doing improvements on the home. She was concerned that Pierre had changed his mind about going to university. Having been keen to go, he had decided not to because of his father's illness. She was determined to help Pierre and had promised to go if the money for his fees and accommodation could be found. But naturally, she conveyed her main worry was her son, Jean-Marc. He could never drive again. As Suzanne had never learnt, it was a hopeless situation. She paused, then asked the notaire if he would be surprised to learn that she had 2 other grown-up children. He replied that in his job nothing ever shocked him. She said that she had a younger son, Henri, who was a chef and who had gone to Australia over 20 years ago. She hadn't seen him since. He never wrote, but normally gave her a telephone call around every Christmas. It was hurtful, but she had completely lost contact with her daughter Carole, who had gone off with a slimy married man from Marseille. They were staying in her house when she caught him stealing money from her handbag. She told them to go and had never seen them since. It worried her that on her death, her 3 children all had to get an equal share of her property under French law. The notaire nodded and explained that in some countries you can draw up a will and leave your entire estate to whoever you liked. But here in France, the law stipulates that your property must be divided equally among your children. This being the case, she told the notaire that she was going to make a New Year resolution. Yes, a resolution to sell her property, put all her money into a savings account, and then rent a flat in the city to be near her son. Her priority now was to ensure Jean-Marc was well cared for, with all her assets in the bank. The notaire confirmed she was right. Money in the bank could be split 3 ways easily, and property can't. So even if her daughter could not be traced, her sons could have 1/3 of the money quite quickly. She took out the documents relating to her house from her bag and instructed the notaire to immediately put her house and land up for sale. 3 days later, the baker's wife arrived in her little blue van and saw the baguette that she'd left on the porch the previous day was still there. And then she realised that all the shutters were shut. They broke in and found her in the bedroom behind the carved swirls in polished warmer on the foot of her huge bed, a tiny and cold little stiff body in black stretched out on the covers, no longer able to keep her New Year resolution. That day later, Pierre blinked at the familiar writing on the envelope that arrived in the post. He opened it, and he found a cheque and a note attached inside that read, "This is for your university studies, from your grandmother." And that's the end of the story. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy more short stories from me. Do look out for them. Thank you.